So, the Intervale Center turns 30 this year, right? And that's not an insignificant birthday. In fact, in some cultures, it's fraught with meaning. For instance, in my culture, right, which I would describe as white, socially anxious, and kind of like irrationally overconfident in my intelligence, it kind of presents you with a stark set of options, right? On the one hand, you can decide that you're not a kid anymore, and you can embrace the challenge and opportunities of adulthood, time to grow up, right? But then there's this other choice that some of us make, which is to take a good look in the mirror and take a deep breath and do something incredibly kind of short-sighted and stupid, right? In my case, I did the latter, because when I turned 30, what I really decided was that I wanted to become an actor. Now, never mind that I lived here in teeny tiny Burlington, Vermont, right? Or that I didn't really have a plan for how this was going to happen, or that I had friends who, by that point in their lives, have already been like, "This is way too hard," and given up their dreams of a life on the stage. This was the life for me, and I suppose. Like the 70 some odd percent of Americans who consider themselves above average, that I had somehow fallen prey to this seductive logic that what was going to make me happy was by living a life that was distinguished, that was unique somehow, right? That I wasn't a normal average person, right? That joy was somehow synonymous with exceptionalism. And so I packed it up, moved all the way to California, Blue Lake, California, where I enrolled at the Del Arte International School of Physical Theater, right? Where I would spend the next year of my life rolling around on the floor, quite literally clowning around, and as my classmate's father put it at graduation, borrowing good American money to learn how to stand on one leg. The unofficial motto of Del Arte is effort, risk, momentum, joy. And I figured out pretty quickly that I was actually pretty good at the effort, risk, and momentum part, and I was really, really lousy at the joy part. That I just couldn't find any happiness in this path that I had chosen for myself. But like any diligent student, I decided I was gonna grit my teeth, and I was gonna power through, and I was gonna be happy. I was gonna be happy being an actor, right? And the more I efforted, the harder it got and the further away it got. And I just couldn't find any happiness at all in the work. And if the job of an actor is to be a student of the emotions, I was a dismal failure. And so after a year, I decided I was gonna hang it up, right? So now here I am, I'm 31, I'm more or less an MFA dropout, no plan, no real direction, no sense of what I'm doing with my life, but I had a couple of key things that were going for me. First of all, I had my wife, who, against all odds, had followed me out to California. We had about 800 bucks between the two of us, and we had this crappy 1997 Saturn that my parents had given to us, right? You had one of those too, huh? Yeah. So anyways, so what do, right? Well, in that moment, you kind of do what anybody has done since the Europeans conquered the continent, right? You just strike out for the territory. So you get in whatever vehicle you have, and you wander around, and you hope that happiness or enlightenment or something kind of resembling home will find you along the way, right? So we launched on the great unplanned North American road trip. And we had been on the road about 2 weeks, and we were driving through Central Oregon. And I don't know if anyone's ever been out that way, but they really like their chainsaws out there. And coming from Vermont, I grew up in Vermont, where here logging is really as much of an art as a science, right? But out there, there's just mile after mile after mile of these massive clear cuts. And I had never seen anything like it before. It blew me away. Like, here was miles of this ancient primeval forest being turned into toilet paper. And people thought that was a good idea, right? And we're driving along, and I'm sitting in the passenger seat, and in a rare moment of self-awareness, I realized that that I was having more of an intense emotional reaction to seeing those trees cut down than I had had in an entire year of acting training. And so I turned to my wife and I said, Kayla, I don't know what this means, but I want to do something to fix this. And she said the most wonderful thing a partner can ever say to you, which is, I support you in that. And so many twisted turns of the road, and about a year later, we found our way back to Vermont, as these things happen. And still, now I'm 32, no plan, right, no real direction, but I have this vision, right? I'm this transformational change agent who's going to protect and restore the planet. And so I got a job at a deli, right? Because, right, and nothing says transformational change agent like making Reubens, right? And so I'm not going to pull any punches. It was just a terrible, awful time in my life. I woke up every day with this feeling of dread and a feeling of very, very little sense of self-worth, just thinking, what the hell am I doing with myself? And the more I had this feeling of dread, the more broken I began to feel, and the further away I felt from a life of effort, risk, momentum, and joy. And it just became this terrible, vicious cycle that I didn't really know how to break out of. I didn't know how to arrive at some place. And sure, the role of one's life, or the goal of one's life, isn't to be exceptional, but at least to be useful seems like a modest goal. Certainly I can be useful somehow. And I would drive home every day in tears, just feeling incredibly broken. And one day, without really intending to, I drove down to the Intervale to go for a walk. And it was one of those early June days where Burlington is at its most seductive. Like the trees had that flush of like emerald green growth, and the birds were singing, and the air smelled like freshly tilled soil. Everyone's so happy. And I thought to myself, what is this place? Like, has this really been here all this time? I mean, I knew about the Intervale. Like, I'm from here, but I hadn't really experienced it. I hadn't had that moment of arriving and really understanding what the Intervale was. And so it became a little ritual. I would wake up, panic, make Reubens, have an existential crisis, drive home in tears, and then go for a walk at the Intervale, right? Not an ideal life, but not altogether without redemption either, right? And so it was a day I was going for a walk down there, and I was walking along the river, and there's a place that people may know along the river where the two trails converge, and there's those old car chassis just sticking up out of the floodplain, right? Sort of like Burlington's miniature version of Cadillac Desert, right? And I was walking along the trail, and I just stopped dead in my tracks. And in that moment, I realized I knew that everything around me that I had come to value and appreciate so much at one point had been a dump, right? The Intervale was a dump, right? That's when you had a car that you didn't need, or a dishwasher, or a pet. You just brought it down there, and that's where you got rid of it, right? When something was broken and didn't have any worth, the Intervale was where you dumped it. And it's only through the collective visioning and collective effort of this community, and day after day after day of many, many people in this room deciding that this place is worth something, that we've changed it. It's become this place we call the Intervale, this place that reminds me of a concept I once heard from someone who teaches permaculture called site repair, which means that we don't just fix the earth so we can use it again. It's not a button or a zipper, right? But that we fundamentally restore the planet so that it restores us, right? That the things that we choose to fix in our lives in turn will fix us. So on its 30th birthday to the Intervale, I say happy birthday and thank you for being a place when you're feeling lost or broken or in need of just the tiniest little bit of joy can help you to find your way home. Thanks.